The UN Secretary-General has expressed his full support for the ongoing dialogue between the Venezuelan government and opposition. The World Health Organization has officially declared an Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Joaquin El Chapo Guzman has been sentenced to life in prison in the United States. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed his full support for the dialogue process being held in Barbados. The vote of support was given early on Wednesday in a meeting with Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza. The dialogue, which resumed on Monday between the Venezuelan government and sectors of the opposition, is being facilitated by Norway. Minister Arreaza says that Venezuela is reviewing joint projects with UN agencies in order to deepen cooperation.
We came to share what's been happening in our country with the Secretary-General, a country under aggression, and it's always good when multilateralism provides the response needed before unilateral positions, which are trying to suffocate a country. We have received, as always, support for the dialogue process. We express our gratitude, as does the Secretary-General, to Norway, its government, for the facilitation that allows us to advance between the sides in Venezuela, and we express the need for the rest of the international community, the countries, blocs of countries, to support or at least respect this dialogue process. Hopefully, this process lasts a long time and there arrives a political agreement or coexistence in Venezuela soon. It's necessary. There could be a truce amongst sides so that we can advance in this dialogue process. We also received other elements geopolitically and around the world. This weekend, we had the ministerial meeting of the movement of non-aligned countries, and when we look into the future to see how to guarantee peace and security through multilateralism, it's always good to discuss this with the Secretary-General.
When asked if President Nicolas Maduro would meet with US President Donald Trump, Arreaza said that Venezuela is always willing to hold talks.
What are the chances that President Maduro will meet with President Trump, maybe in September, and what would be the outcome, positive or?
It depends on what they want here in the United States government. Our will is always there, to have dialogue with whomever wants to have dialogue with Venezuela, including the United States. And I am sure that the outcomes would be very interesting in the case that this meeting would happen.
How can you...
Gracias.
The United States is set to directly fund the right-wing Venezuelan opposition by taking money designated for humanitarian aid in Central America. The Donald Trump administration has said that $41.9 million designated for migrant aid in Guatemala and Honduras would instead be diverted to pay for the needs of the Venezuelan opposition. The money could be used to further criminal enterprise, as evidence has illustrated opposition murder plots, planned coup d'etats and corruption. Two of opposition figure Juan Guaido's personal security detail have been arrested in connection with the theft of weapons during the failed April 30th coup. Reactionary forces in Venezuela are deeply divided, with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo admitting that as many as 40 individuals are vying for leadership. Social spending in Venezuela has increased by 33% during the last 20 years of the Bolivarian project. These funds are directly allocated to plans for education, health, housing and social security, guaranteeing the human rights of the people. However, these figures were not considered in the report published by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet.
This kitchen feeds hundreds of people for free every day. It operates in this building called the Great Mission Base, where they host recreational, cultural and sporting activities. Political entities like communal councils and other territorial organizations also meet here.
We care for people on the streets, people with disabilities, seniors, children with weight issues, as well as workers here. We have an important role in helping feed people with low income who need good nutrition.
We work out, we have an hour at the gym and conduct other activities. Nothing is charged. Enjoying the facilities is part of our collaborative offer.
Missions like this are part of the social care programs created during the government of Hugo Chavez, which have managed to increase access to food, culture, literacy and health, among other social indicators. The government reports that these figures were not considered by Michelle Bachelet in her recent report.
The revolutionary government places a lot of emphasis on social issues, on integration, on integrated care, and on the human being, on Venezuelans.
Bachelet's statement is totally irrational, because if she had come here, she would have seen all the things that the government does. The revolution for the people. We take care without discrimination whatsoever to all the people who come here. We don't ask if they think differently, if they're good or bad. We take care of everyone.
Between 1999 and 2018, Venezuela increased the national budget in areas like health, social security, education, housing, science and culture by up to 38 times. For the government, these figures represent human rights protection in a universal and inalienable way.
We've seen how a big part of the Venezuelan society was made invisible by trying to weaponize human rights. A big opportunity to dignify the United Nations system was lost because of an attempt to denounce Venezuela. No country in the world has the right to attack another. No country has the right to declare war on another country.
Despite the economic crisis and the unilateral sanctions imposed on Venezuela, 4 mission bases with an investment of $40 million are set to open soon. The government is investing 75% of income in social programs of this kind.
Puerto Ricans are gathering for another demonstration to demand the resignation of Governor Rossello. The organizers say it could be the biggest in the country's history. The protests against the Rossello administration are into their 5th day, with massive crowds taking to the streets following revelations about the governor's conduct in office. A social media chat between high-ranking political figures administered by Rossello was leaked on Saturday, revealing homophobic, racist and misogynistic comments. Despite the protest, Rossello says he will remain in office. Guyana is being advised by Western diplomats to adhere to the ruling issued by the Caribbean Court of Justice to replace the chairman of the country's election commission and call elections by September 18th. The diplomats include the U.S. ambassador to Guyana, the UK High Commissioner to Guyana, and the European Union ambassador. In a letter, they described the CCJ's ruling as definitive. Last week, the CCJ urged Guyana's politicians to ensure that elections are held within the time frame stipulated by the Constitution, which is 3 months after the no-confidence motion was passed against the government. Although it was passed in December 2018, it was appealed and eventually upheld by the CCJ on July 12th.
This possibility lies with the opposition.
The governor of Rio de Janeiro, Wilson Witzel, has justified the high number of killings by local police, claiming that the deaths are normal and that the figure would rise during his time in office. Witzel said that the deaths are a result of his policy to face terrorism, a euphemism of the governors for drug traffickers. He also announced plans for a prison for criminals who want to collaborate with the police. According to official figures, the police in Rio have killed 714 people so far in 2019, a 20% rise since 2018. During the same period, criminal homicides fell by 24%.
I want to construct a prison to transfer some prisoners and have a special citizens prison. The doors are open. Those who want to leave criminality behind will have the option, but those that choose to face the police will find themselves either dead or in jail.
Health workers are striking and demonstrating in Peru to demand that the government solves the crisis in the country's hospitals. Our correspondent Jaime Herrera has been speaking to some of them.
The workers from various different health sector unions are here outside the health ministry. They are demonstrating because they have been demanding talks to tackle what they say is a crisis in the hospitals. But they say the only answer they have had is repression by the police, using batons and tear gas. We have with us Eva Romero, who is one of the leaders of the union representing admin workers in the health service. Why have you begun this strike today?
Greetings to your viewers. We are not beginning a strike. We have restarted our earlier strike because the government has not carried out what we agreed with the minister and with her predecessor in 2017 and 2018. There were 26 points in that agreement, but they only paid any attention to 12 of them, and then they reduced that to 6 points. What we want now are solutions, not more talks. The hospitals are being neglected. We don't have the equipment we need to work. We can't do the tests we need in the laboratories. The pharmacies have no drugs, and the patients have to wait a very long time to get treated.
What does the government say?
The government says nothing. We need more funding for healthcare. We want to work with the government on the budgets, but the top managers and the government keep putting obstacles in the way of any solution.
Have you suffered repression?
Yes, we have. We came to get solutions and they gave us volleys of tear gas instead. The agreements are there. We just want them to implement them.
We should make clear that the doctors are holding a 48-hour strike, but other unions have started an indefinite strike, and that includes the administrative workers. So we'll be following how this develops.
That was Jaime Herrera with that report. The father of Camilo Catrillanca, the 24-year-old Mapuche who was gunned down by Chile's police force in November 2018, arrived at the presidential palace to demand the resignation of Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick and Vice Minister Rodrigo Ubilla. Marcelo Catrillanca blames them for his son's assassination.
We have come here to deliver a letter to the President, in which we demand the resignation of Interior Minister Andrés Chadwick and his Vice Minister Rodrigo Ubilla. They are politically responsible for the assassination of Camilo Catrillanca. That's why we are here to continue to demand their resignation. Their presence is bad for this country because their hands and conscience are stained with blood.
In other news, Paraguay Senate has called for an extraordinary session to discuss the questioning of the Minister of Interior by Congress in relation to the failure by the government to deal with organized crime and the crisis in the prison system.
Speaking ahead of the session, progressive legislators said the problem of security in the country is structural and cannot be solved by repressive policies. They have also pointed out that the current government has failed to pass policies to address internal security concerns.
If we don't offer an approach from that point of view, we can change all the commanders, the Interior Ministry. One last thing, have you heard the President of the Republic, this new government, since it took power, say anything about developing a new public policy on the issue of security? I haven't.
The government has declared a penitentiary emergency in the country, following the strengthening of criminal groups such as the First Command of the Capital from Brazil, which recently murdered and beheaded 10 people in the regional prison of San Pedro. This has prompted legislators to demand for an integral plan for security.
There is nobody here from whatever background who can go out on the streets without having a fear that they could be a victim of crime. But this is the result of the current model, and for that the government has to present a strategic integral plan on a short and long-term basis. That is what we are asking the President and the Minister of Interior.
According to experts, lack of opportunities for the majority of the population has helped the consolidation of organized crime groups to an extent of entering in traditional political parties and financing political campaigns.
These are emerging groups of great economic power and have a lot of influence in the traditional parties. They finance the councillors, the mayors and legislators. These are groups that are gaining great power, but the state takes crime as a fundamental element.
The Senate of Paraguay has not yet decided if they will give a censorship vote to the ministers responsible for the security of the country. Meanwhile, for opposition legislators and experts, the overcrowding of prisons and the consolidation of transnational criminal groups like the PPC are latent realities.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, protests are ongoing in the DRC over rising insecurity. Join us in a few. Welcome back. The World Health Organization has officially declared the Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo a public health emergency of international concern. The outbreak has so far killed more than 1,600 people. This week, the first case was detected in the city of Goma, which is home to more than 1 million people. Declaring a public health emergency of international concern is one of the most important acts the WHO can take, as it hopes this leads to more international support to tackle the disease.
As a result of this concern for potential further spread, the committee recommended that I declare the outbreak a public health emergency of international concern, FIC, and I have accepted that advice. Our risk assessment remains that the risk of spread in DRC and the region remains very high, and the risk of spread outside the region remains low.
As the Ebola crisis mounts, people took to the streets of Goma in the DRC to demonstrate against increasing insecurity due to murders in the country. The protests were triggered after 2 people were killed on Tuesday evening following a kidnapping that went wrong. Hundreds of people walked around carrying the lifeless body of one of the victims on a homemade stretcher, calling for authorities to act.
We are walking because we believe that we are being neglected. People are dying. There is still no solution. We have assigned a police station, but we wonder if it's to make people safe or what.
The Commission of Inquiry investigating corruption allegations against South Africa's ex-president Jacob Zuma has adjourned until Friday. The decision follows a complaint by Zuma's lawyer that the former president was being cross-examined by the inquiry's legal team. This is contrary to what was agreed upon when he accepted the invitation to testify.
I have a view that my client was brought in here under false pretenses, and now I need him to make up his mind whether he wants to be cross-examined, because it's clear, it's just been confirmed. He's being cross-examined.
It has been decided that we should adjourn the proceedings for the day, and we should not sit tomorrow.
The Sudanese Military Council and Opposition Alliance have signed a power-sharing deal. Protesters and the ruling Military Council have signed a transitional accord after weeks of negotiations, breaking a political deadlock that has gripped the country since President Omar al-Bashir was forced out of office in April. Protests demanding civilian rule have been constant, despite massive repression during which at least 229 demonstrators were killed. The new governing body will rule the country for just over 3 years, after which elections will be held.
The Transitional Military Council and the Alliance for Freedom and Change have reached a very important agreement that constitutes a crucial step towards a comprehensive reconciliation between the two parties, and it will solve all the misunderstanding.
But students in Sudan remain skeptical after the signing of the power-sharing agreement. Many gathered outside the National Ribat University in Khartoum, with some saying they do not trust any arrangement which involves the military.
We will never keep quiet until we have a full civilian government, because that's what we want. We don't want the military council's input because everyone knows that they lie, that they don't keep their word, because they always change it. The military council members are liars.
Zambia's President Edgar Lungu says the country will not change its laws of homosexuality in exchange for foreign aid. In an official statement, Lungu said, quote, "There are certain rights which are enjoyed in some parts of the world which may not be accepted by Zambians." He made the remark when the outgoing Swedish ambassador and the head of a European Union delegation visited him at the State House. Homosexual acts carry a jail sentence of up to 14 years in Zambia, which relate to the British colonial penal code. We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. Joaquin Guzman, popularly known as El Chapo, has been sentenced to life in prison for drug trafficking and money laundering in the United States. El Chapo has been sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 30 years and was ordered to pay $12.6 billion as restitution by a New York court. Guzman complained about the lack of justice in the sentencing. His lawyers claimed there was legal misconduct and that he did not get a fair trial. They had asked for a retrial earlier, which was turned down.
This case was simply an inquisition. It was a show trial, and how it ended is exactly perfect for that description, in that it didn't make a difference what the jury saw, what they said, what they discussed, what they voted on. At the end of the day, all that mattered was the government's evidence, no matter how flawed it may have been, no matter how many lunatics and sociopaths and psychopaths that it depended on. All that mattered was the evidence, and the jury be damned.
The long road that led Chapo Guzman from the mountains of Sinaloa to the courthouse behind us today was paved with death, drugs, and destruction. But it ended today with justice.
China has said it will protect its own interests after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened further tariffs on Chinese goods. However, the spokesperson for the country's foreign ministry, Geng Shuang, added that China remains committed to dialogue in resolving problems.
China always stands for solving the economic and trade frictions with the US through dialogue and consultation. And we are always sincere about the trade negotiations with the United States. But the US side believes there is still a long way to go to reach an economic and trade agreement. I have a Chinese proverb in response, which is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. No matter how long the road is, as long as one firmly goes ahead, they will definitely reach the end. We urge the US side to show determination and perseverance and work with China to reach a mutually beneficial economic and trade agreement on the basis of mutual respect and equality.
For the third consecutive day, Palestinian refugees gathered on the streets of Beirut to protest against Lebanon's labor ministry cracking down on businesses employing foreign workers without a permit. Among their demands, demonstrators asked that the labor ministry ensure they retain access to the local market. In June, the Labour Ministry gave companies a 1-month deadline to acquire work permits. However, following the deadline expiration last week, it has started to shut down non-compliant businesses.
We wish for the Lebanese government to adopt a ministerial resolution to solve the problem of Palestinian people and not to restrict our rights.
International law states that as forcibly displaced refugee in Lebanon, I have the right to work and I am entitled to human rights stipulated in international forums. Therefore, we inform the Minister of Labour, the government of Lebanon and the international community listening to us today that we have a right on the basis that we are forcibly displaced refugees.
Millions of people have been stranded as floods continue sweeping over northeast India. There is growing concern over the lack of food supplies and access to clean water, though the government has said that monsoon rains appear to be easing. More than 4.7 million people have been displaced in the Assam state. At least 153 people have been killed in India, Nepal, Bangladesh and parts of Pakistan since the flooding started.
There is a situation flooding here, so I am taking my son back home. The situation is dire here. The road diversion for the river has also broken. The roads are blocked, so the commute has stopped. There is no way for people to escape from here except crossing this. There is no means provided by the government either.
Spanish and Moroccan maritime services rescued 277 sub-Saharan migrants from the Sea of Alboran on Tuesday night. A spokesperson confirmed that 220 people were rescued on the Spanish side of the sea, while the other 57 were rescued on the Moroccan side. Authorities say a total of 57 women and 4 minors were on board the 3 different vessels. A dead woman was also in one of the boats, although the cause of her death remains unknown. According to official figures, 682 people have died or disappeared in the Mediterranean Sea since the start of 2019. That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.